Okay, at this point in time, I will now call the meeting to order, and on behalf of all members of the committee, I want to welcome our witnesses here today. This meeting is in continuance of our ongoing study into open government, and the committee is very pleased to have with us today three witnesses. The first witness is Mr. David Hume. Mr. Hume is the Executive Director of Citizen Engagement for the British Columbia Provincial Government. However, I should point out that he's appearing here today as an individual in his own right. The second witness is Mr. David Wallace. Mr. Wallace is the Chief Information Officer for the City of Toronto, and as we all know, the City of Toronto has been doing some interesting things on open government. Mr. Wallace, we understand he's not in his seat, as you can see. We understand that his flight has been delayed, so hopefully he will be joining us in session. The third and final witness is Mr. Vincent Gogolek. Mr. Gogolek is the Policy Director of the British Columbia Freedom of Information and Privacy Association.
He's now the Executive Director.
Excuse me, he's now the Executive Director of that association, as the clerk has pointed out. So, again, welcome, and we're going to start with opening remarks from all three individuals, and perhaps we'll start with you first, Mr. Hume. And just before you start, Mr. Hume, I just want to point out to the members of the committee that Mr. Wallace, who I've already introduced, has arrived. Welcome, Mr. Wallace.
Thank you. Still snowing.
Mr. Hume.
So thank you very much to the committee for having me. It's a great chance, actually, to be of service today, and so I hope my remarks to you are helpful. In my day job, I'm a public servant with the British Columbia Public Service, as the chair mentioned. My focus there is on citizen engagement in policy development and service improvement. But I would like to make clear to the committee that while my remarks are certainly shaped by that experience today, I'm on my own time. I took some vacation to come out, and I'm speaking for myself. So the views expressed here are my own and do not reflect the views of British Columbia. And with that disclaimer, let me briefly lay out what I'd like to cover today. First is why open government matters not just as a democratic principle, but as a strategy of public management. An example of how open strategies based on open government approaches can help solve public problems in new ways. The importance of thinking beyond provision of data and information to working to engage people with data information, and a short word about the requirements of political leadership around open government. So to get started, I think one of the things that we need to recognize is that the skills of governing in the 21st century are very, very different than the 20th century. We face two significant and basically unavoidable problems in government in Canada, as does the rest of the world. We're mostly broke, and our demographics dictate that our public sector workforce is likely to be shrinking dramatically very soon. So if we have little money and very few people, how are we going to get good things done for the country? My basic answer to that question is that governments will need to learn to collaborate. Whereas before they could afford to be top-down, we think it, we design it, we do it kind of organizations, today governments find themselves grappling with highly complex issues that they cannot solve alone. So challenges like poverty and climate change cannot be legislated out of existence, nor can healthy communities and safe streets simply be created as much as we want them. Instead, these problems require coordinated and collaborative action from many actors, including individuals, for us to make progress. This theme has lately been taken up by political leadership in the U.S. and the U.K. One version of this theme is President Obama's campaign tagline, "Yes, we can." Another version has come from Prime Minister David Cameron of the United Kingdom, who said during the launch of his campaign, and I quote, "We can deal with our debts, we can mend our broken society, we can restore faith in our shattered political system, but only if millions of people are fired up and inspired to play a part in their future." So taken in this context, open government and particularly open data, it becomes more than a discussion about transparency and democracy. It can be seen as a strategy to empower the public, to collaborate with government and with one another, to understand and accomplish goals. It's about effectiveness as much as it is about principle. And I recognize that this is a broad statement, and maybe some folks may think that it's a bit of a wild claim, but my recent experience demonstrates that such an approach is possible. A project that I was involved with my work in BC called Apps for Climate Action was a contest for web and software developers to take freely available government data and apply their ingenuity to creating web and mobile applications that help people understand and deal with the impacts of climate change. The contest produced 16 qualified entries, some of which I would say were frankly brilliant, and the contest helped the BC's Climate Action Secretariat make the most of new technology, and create media interest, and reach out to a whole new demographic of people to inspire them to get busier around taking action on climate. So while the important thing I want to point out is that while coordinated by the provincial government, the contest was sponsored by businesses and not-for-profits who had an interest in open data and climate action. The $40,000 in cash and prizes that we raised for the contest entrance came from sponsors, and we also received in-kind contributions from sponsors. So for example, the contest website was developed by a small web company based in Vancouver. Contest entrants had access to usability experts from a Vancouver firm to help make their apps more user-friendly. The Vancouver Aquarium hosted the awards ceremony. David Eves, who spoke to you earlier this week, also donated his time and advice. So we made the sponsorships work not by doing a classic procurement where government commissions specific solutions to specific problems. Instead, BC issued an opportunity notice that described the problem that we were trying to solve, signaled the kind of resources that we were looking for to help us, and asked for, and then invited those who were interested in helping us achieve the goal to apply. And then basically, we were open to working with anyone that wanted to work with us, and the response was really excellent and significant. And really, what we wound up with were groups that were passionate about climate action and were prepared to meaningfully commit their resources with us at the province to help create a great contest. And so, as I hope's clear, the result of being open, and this connecting back to open government, being open to other ideas and resources meant the provincial government could accomplish far more than it ever could accomplish on its own. So there have been a series of open data-based apps contests around the world, and they have their strengths and weaknesses. Many have been far better structured and enjoy more success than the one that I was involved with. And I commend Apps for Ottawa and Apps for Edmonton, which are two recent contests in Canada, as an example of how open data can be used to engage the public. And those were both, I think, wild successes. But for me, the lesson of the contest was how effective data-driven collaboration can be, and how many resources are out there for governments to leverage, provided they know how to ask. I spent a lot of time at public events promoting the contest, showing people data, brainstorming idea with programmers and non-programmers, looking for patterns that could spark a prize-winning idea. The conversations with members of the public were amazing. There was passion, positivity, focus, creativity, and analysis. There was a true creative ethos, and participants were looking to themselves to take the next steps around on the part of the problem that meant the most to them. They weren't waiting for government to offer solutions. They were looking to create and implement their own. And it was an awesome citizenship, let me tell you, and there was a lot of it out there. This brings me to the gap that I see in many open government strategies, particularly around open data. It's not enough to simply publish data or information. Work needs to be done to focus people on it. Build community around ideas and analysis, see how it applies to real problems, set the norms of responsible use of this valuable public resource. Otherwise, the data may not meet its full potential. In my view, this is the new definition and challenge of public policy work for public servants, to find ways to benefit from the insight and expertise of those outside government's walls, prepared to work together on a shared agenda. Because, returning to the theme of demographics and finances, we're going to need those people in the very near future. So we're seeing early signals of this approach internationally. The U.S., for example, has appointed what's called an open data evangelist to reach out to communities, schools, educational institutions, and others. And it is building partnerships with educational institutions to build more capacity for data literacy in the United States. New Zealand is integrating open data into its consultations, into its public consultations, particularly around technical subjects, to encourage a common basis of analysis for those that provide submissions. While I can't authoritatively say how well these experiments are working, I do know that they are important, and I believe that you should recommend should you recommend open data to the government, that you also recommend that resources to encourage engagement with the public also come along with that. And since this is a political venue, I want to say one quick thing about the importance of matching open government and political leadership in Canada. I'm hopeful that our leaders, you, begin to see the power and possibilities of using mechanisms of open government to collaborate more deeply with the public. That instead of simply offering solutions to win votes, political leaders can see how effective and necessary asking the right questions to bring the right people together to get so that lasting solutions to the big problems that challenge us, healthcare, climate change, to name two, can be meaningfully addressed. This means that our leaders challenge groups and individuals to take responsibility for problems and commit their own resources to solving them. It also means that all concerned are accountable for delivering their piece of the puzzle. Government has a part, but isn't necessarily on the hook for delivering the whole. Open government, and in particular open data, offers a way of working towards this possibility because of the collaborative capacity that it creates. Open data can become a platform for collaboration with the public, between government and the public. And I hope we as a country can seize it. As the committee continues its work, I'm looking forward to seeing how you draw on the remarkable reservoir of Canadian expertise in thinking about governance and public engagement. Many of the ideas you've heard from me are inspired by people like Don Lenihan of the Public Policy Forum and Thomas Homer Dixon of the University of Waterloo. I brought a list of other folks that I can refer you to if you're interested, and we can get into the conversation. And in particular, I would like to recommend colleagues in British Columbia to speak to you about British Columbia's Government 2.0 plan, which includes references to open data and open information. In particular, the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Citizen Services, Kim Henderson, and Alan Seckel, the head of the British Columbia Public Service, I think would be excellent spokespeople for the provincial government's directions in this area. So with that, thank you very much, and I'd like to conclude my remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yoon. We're now going to go to Mr. Wallace. Mr. Wallace, your opening comments.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity for speaking with you today. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion this afternoon. I believe you received the brief that I sent forward. So I'm just going to center on some select slides to emphasize the messaging and to actually build on what David has been talking about. I think the key thing from a municipal perspective is that as the government closest to the people, we're in a lot of interactions with them, and we're seeing a lot of requirements and demands for opening up government, for making more transparent, and for basically being able to track how we're doing from a performance perspective and making sure that they have a voice in their local government. And I believe that's across all governments is a potential. And we're seeing that right across Canada, around the world, as Dave was saying, and also right up through to the federal government in terms of some of our discussions, such as in Natural Resource Canada and some other very forward-thinking areas. What we believe in our space is that in this local government, where we're the closest to the people, that we're starting to see this very large transformation happen, and it's starting to gain momentum. And I'm going to select a few slides here to focus in on some of the work we've done and to hopefully put some information out there to get you to ask some questions and drill in further. I'm partnering with my city clerk, Yulie Watkus, who is the information lead in our city, as in most municipalities. And we're looking at from both an information management and an IT perspective. We also work with the divisions, who are the program deliverers. In terms of the presentation material I have to you, the introduction introduces some of the challenges and some of the reasons why there's this new culture of open government, which we see open government as the default, which is really, that's the starting point, and we go from there. But I'd like to direct you to page 4, where you see the concept of Toronto at your service. And this is when Mayor Rob Ford, who recently was elected, came to power. He came to the first council meeting and laid out 4 specific priorities. The first one was improve customer service. The second, to make City Hall more transparent and more accountable. The third, to reduce the size of government and cost of government. And the fourth, to improve transportation. Well, even the last one can benefit from open data. And in fact, all of them can be done improving customer service and efficiencies because, again, the data is out there. Everything from the better scheduling from the TDC when the next bus is coming, and we've had apps built on that data, right through to better customer online services, to participating in enabled and e-government. So in all ways, open government and open data is enhancing what the mayor is aiming at in terms of his priorities. The next slides talk a little about some of the growth in this area and some of the number of transactions, which shows the web as a increasingly preferred channel. The telephone still is the top one, but very, very rapidly the gap is closing so that the web is becoming a very preferred channel. And that's also indicating that 98% of Canadians have some type of internet access, which means, again, that open data online can be very accessible. But I want to define open government and open data because I think there's so many different definitions, and it was included in your package, but I want to emphasize that it's more than just the data. It's this concept of open interaction and engagement and civic engagement and getting people to make deputations and being involved, whether it's online or in person, and then sharing that experience with others and benefiting from leveraging the unique decision-making capability of that wider space. So I think that's really important because at the end of the day, what we see at the local level is that open government, open data increase the trust in government and confidence, in particular in their most local government and the one they do the most dealings with. But we think in all governments that's the case. On the next page, you'll see that we have a system called the Toronto Meeting Management Information System. Now, this is a really important system because if you go and the link is there, you can see that everything about the city government is online. All the agendas, all of the reports, everything is there, and also the data that's about it. And I think there's links in here that you can explore that with. But one of the most important elements about this in our strategy is the basis of both proactive and routine disclosure. Proactive, where we put the data up online or the information online, and routine disclosure, where we can quickly get the information there in terms of a normal request. This has reduced our freedom of information requests down by half, and therefore the cost of government goes down, people's responsiveness to the information goes up, and again, trust goes up and improves consultation. We also been talking to Dr. Ann Kavukian, who I believe is either coming or has been here, and she talks a lot about privacy by design. So by designing it in a system like this ensures that people have access to their government. The other thing we do is we support it with checklists and information and advice, both from the city clerks on a policy perspective and ourselves in IT from a technology perspective. The next few slides talk about our election system, some of our key developments in online in terms of just shooting through the roof in terms of access to online services. But I'd like to go to now slide 11, and this is where we talk about the value chain of open data. Now, open data requires work, but it requires work based on what you do every day. It doesn't add to your tasks. It doesn't add extra resources. We believe it's part of what we do every day. And what I mean by that is we have these systems there to help us with our professional program delivery. We have information systems there to help with the delivery of government process and also in terms of improving the citizens' situation. And we live by three basic principles. We are providing data that already exists. We don't go out and create new data just for the sake of opening up data. This is just regularly part of what we do every day, and we put it up on the web. We also offer both raw and aggregate form, and most importantly, we put it on a refreshed basis, and we put the metadata or context around it so people know what the data means. We also need to make sure that the source, that we can actually share it, that the right format is there, and that the proper governance is in place. And you can see that we have lots of governance. But the reason for that is to make sure that the right data is there and that it is truly part of our strategic directions. And this value chain has been ongoing since 2009. And that has been a very good process and has worked very well. And we've got a lot of good response from the community. On the next page, you can see what we launched. And I think you've heard of Mark Sermon of Mozilla. And this is the Firefox provider. And he challenged the City of Toronto in 2008 to think like the web, to look to the web, to look to people out there, and to look for help. Government doesn't have to do it all itself. To open up, crowdsource, and ask for help to sponsor the development of further uses of open data. In that light, a community site was developed at the same time we launched this called DataTO or datatoronto.org. This was created by community people on their own time, and it was also spawned a later dataot.org, which is dataottawa.org. Again, community players putting the demand side or part of the input saying, here's data that we're interested in, what do you think? And we've been working with them and other points of interest to get the data out onto the web, and that's been very helpful. The next slide shows you just a breakdown of the most popular data sites and downloads. Again, the critical success factors for open data are that it's relevant data, regularly refreshed, and that it is the proper context. And otherwise, you don't know what you're getting. And in the earlier uses of open data sites, that was part of the problem, was getting stale, and the people didn't know what the data really stood for. The other thing we do is we open up and work with the Web 2 or Government 2 perspective, saying, what do you think of what we're doing? So we ask for, through Twitter and different means, of our website and processes, and we've got lots of different comments. Those are included. Some of the feeds from the Twitter is there. We've also seen some great results. There's some application examples included in the slide presentation. And one of the most interesting one was around someone who created an iPhone app, so when you're walking to the bus stop, you already know when your bus is going to get there. And that's pretty exciting. There's other ones like around Dine Safe, making sure the restaurant you're going to go to is good to go to. The other side of it, just like in Ottawa, is 311, and we have the largest in Canada, second largest in North America. And 311, you think of the telephone, but it also has a lot of self-service now on the web, and we're opening up the knowledge that we capture and advice that we give out to citizens, and we put that up online so you can self-service that. We're also going to be putting up the request data very soon on our open data site. We've had over 1 million calls in the first year, and it just keeps building in popularity. And again, it's a great connector out to the populace, as here in Ottawa. You'll see in the presentation on the next slide, again, some of the feeds that come in, because they also track through Twitter in terms of how things are going. The other thing I'd like to focus on, and again, the next few slides show some of what our web is doing, is next generation open data. Now, just putting open data up there in a raw form and machine-readable form is very helpful. As David is saying, there's contests in different ways that you can get developers to develop new, interesting applications. But not everyone is a developer. Not everyone has the capabilities to develop applications or perhaps even want to. But they do want to know about their city or their government and what's going on. One of the concepts starting to happen is something called a data blog. And what that means is that you have a variety of different data types. If you want to look at a spreadsheet or a visualization of data or raw data that you want to download and develop an app with, that would all be available on the website. New York City has done this, and we're looking to do that around our 311. And I know it's a little bit unclear on the slide there, but there's different examples on the slide of both visualization. We also want to get our budget data up there with a navigator, because budget data is some of the most complex data. And we're actually working with the Open Community through a hackathon, which happened in December, where people are building a navigator application so they can actually work through our data on our budget. And that's going to quicken budget data out to the public, which is helping the debate around our rapidly changing budget situation. The next slide I want to just finish up here in terms of what I mean by transformation journey. This takes time, but it isn't a sequence of events. It's many things happening in different maturity levels at the same time. It's really understanding the citizens' needs, working with them, understanding, keeping the pulse on it, bringing the government close anytime, anywhere to people, and ensuring that you're continually listening and building their confidence by offering out more and more about the government through open data and open government. You've heard from Chris Moore, I believe. And I believe Guy Michaud is coming, and we've also been working with Vancouver and ourselves through something called G4. If you're interested, we can share the recent report, which the cover is shown in your presentation there, if you like. It's fairly deep, but it's got a lot of good information. If you're interested, we can certainly share that with you. The key recommendations are noted on the slide speaking notes there. And what these are for is to really focus in on what different municipalities can do in opening up their data even more. We believe there's some common areas of focus, such as licensing, formats, and sharing our experiences. So to conclude my speaking points. Change will just continue to happen. Certainly it's happening in the City of Toronto, and I know it's happening here in Ottawa and at the provincial governments too. The challenges are not going to stop. They're going to continue to evolve. We believe by working through new thinking and reaching out and working with the public itself and other levels of government with these important frameworks that we can make government better and more open and, in fact, more responsive. Thank you very much. That's my remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wallace. We're going to hear from Mr. Vincent Gogolek right now. Mr. Gogolek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members of the committee, for inviting us. I presume to provide a somewhat cautionary note amidst all the optimism. We do applaud the committee for taking up the cause of open government, although we note that the very first episode of the BBC television series Yes Minister was entitled Open Government. And it features this exchange between the two lead characters, Bernard Woolley and Sir Humphrey Appleby, the equivalent, it would be Deputy Minister. Bernard Woolley, but surely the citizens of a democracy have a right to know. Sir Humphrey Appleby, no, they have a right to be ignorant. Knowledge only means complicity in guilt. Ignorance has a certain dignity. And if Canadians and their elected representatives really do wish to have open government, it will be vital to keep the Sir Humphrey Applebys of this world away from the task of creating it. They will want to preserve the citizens' dignity at all costs. FIPA supports the increasing push for routine electronic disclosure of information by governments and public bodies. Public debate and public policy development can also be helped by making more and better information available to everyone. What has come to be known as open government, the enhanced availability of data through the public by electronic means.
Just for a second, perhaps we'll, I think the translators may be having a little difficulty keeping up, so if you could just slow it down, perhaps by about 20 or 30%, that'd be great.
What has come to be known as open government, the enhanced availability of data to the public through electronic means, will hopefully allow anyone interested in a subject area to be able to do better research, provide better input to public consultations, and improve their representations to government as a result. This is a good thing, but it is not the only thing. And it does not mean that bringing in electronic open government will bring about a truly open government. I've set out the three ways that government information becomes public. I'll just skip through them quickly. Because most, if not all, records now exist in electronic form, much more government information should be available on government websites. The Access to Information Review Task Force report in 2001 set out a number of recommendations for improvement for the release of information. Recently, a number of governments have gone down this road. The US, the UK, Australia, a number of subnational governments, many of the municipalities have undertaken this challenge. There is no insurmountable challenge preventing the Government of Canada from moving forward with a similar initiative. Information Commissioner Legault has outlined several manageable concerns, some of which are common to open data schemes everywhere. Others, like the requirement of translation to meet official language legal and constitutional requirements, are particular to this country and especially to the federal government. In BC, our Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act has been subject to 3 different committee reviews. There's a 6-year review, a 5-year review of the Act, and each of the committees has recommended more routine release, more use of electronic data, more routine disclosure by government. But we have yet to see it. Now, the second method is access to information requests. That's if the routine disclosure is the push from government out to its citizens and to the rest of us. Access to information provides us as citizens with the ability to pull information from government. So it's a complete code for making access requests, and it also provides a process of review. It's a vital link in the chain of citizens' ability to find out what their governments are doing and provides a balance between the rights of citizens to information and the legitimate requirements for confidentiality in certain clearly defined limited circumstances. However, it was not intended as, nor should it be, the primary method of release. The primary method of release should be routine disclosure. We won't go into the many deficiencies of the ETHI system. This committee has gone through that. I will spare you a recap of it, but we will come back to it because the ETHI system is vital for any true system of open government. Finally, there's unauthorized, unrequested release, which is basically what happens when there's no system or it breaks down. It's leaks. WikiLeaks is an example. This is another way that information sometimes comes out. In BC, we also have a section of our Act that puts an obligation on heads of public bodies to release information, even without a request, about a risk of significant harm to the environment or to the health or safety of the public or a group of people, or the disclosure of which, for any other reason, is clearly in the public interest. Now, I'd also like to take you through some potential pitfalls of open government. One is that open government, open data, essentially becomes electronic brochures, that government puts these up now, and what we have, the risk is that government will just push favored content out onto the web. That it will not be able to be manipulated by citizens, that it will not be in a very usable form. There's probably no way around this. We have to have a certain measure of faith in our public servants and in our government that they will put out information that is, and will not unreasonably restrict the type of information being disseminated. However, that has not been the experience under ETHI, under different parties, under different prime ministers and different responsible ministers. Without a way to compel disclosure, there is little reason to believe that the information will be routinely released, that the information that is routinely released will be much more than electronic brochures. The reluctance of governments to allow broad disclosure of information they don't favor releasing is very well understood, but a current instance in BC, in which we are directly involved, provides an outstanding example. We're now involved in one of the longest running FOI requests probably anywhere in this country. We're now into year 7 of a contract between IBM and the provincial government. The government has taken us to court a number of times. They have invoked a number of exceptions. The exceptions have all been rejected. They're now off to court again. Our ultimate point in this is that that major government contracts should be readily available online for public scrutiny. And the BC government has acknowledged that the public interest in making contracts available by routinely posting contracts of public-private online. There is a great deal, the government has not seen fit to put this contract up, despite the Information Privacy Commissioner suggesting that this and similar contracts should be put up online. The Commissioner, Elizabeth Denham, has said proactively releasing these contracts would save everyone considerable time, money, and paperwork. At the end of the day, we may have to put it up ourselves, because pending the result of litigation or a change of heart by the government. And this should serve as a cautionary example for anybody who thinks that open data is going to be something that will come about easily. Another problem is that, another potential pitfall is that by becoming entranced with potential, and it is real potential of open data, that we bypass the access to information system, that we ignore the serious problems it has. The current Information Commissioner or predecessors have appeared before you and outlined many of these. This committee has looked at this in the past, has made reports attempting to try and remedy this situation. It also appears that the amount of information being released is on a downward path. According to the Information Commissioner, during the past 10 years, the number of cases where all information has been disclosed has decreased from 41% to 16%. Much is being made of the idea of putting documents released through ETHI online for everyone to see, but there's little point in doing this if requesters are essentially unable to get that information because the system is so dysfunctional. Now, this leads me to the other question, which is something we have run into in BC, which we call trompe-l'oeil transparency. We're currently involved in a complaint involving BC Ferries, which is a government-owned corporation which runs the ferry service in British Columbia. It was put back under the FOI regime late last year as a result of an investigation by the province's Comptroller General, who thought this would be a way of improving governance. They've developed, their policy states that any records released to requesters will immediately be posted on the BC Ferries website. The result of this is that requesters are deprived of the first use of the information they obtain, which in turn takes away much of the requester's motivation for investing the time and resources in making FOI requests. To state it plainly, we have here a covert attempt to stifle FOI requests in the guise of the noble aim of allowing greater public access. If you make it so that the information you get is essentially unusable, or you're not able to use it as a reporter or however, well, then there will be fewer and fewer requests which will be posted online. It's not the first time a public body has tried to do this. But BC Ferries is the first one to make it official policy and to use it to actively discourage requests. The policy works this way. Requesters are required to go through the normal processes of FOI requests. BC Ferries charges fees to the person requiring the information to the maximum permissible in every case. Any released records are posted to the BC Ferries website. If requested electronically, the requester will receive them at the same time as they are posted. If sent in hard copy, the records will be posted within 24 hours of the records being mailed to the requester. We have this direct experience with this. We got the stuff sent to us. We got it 3 days after it went up. Now, I'm just going to move it along here to the, I'd like to conclude by saying FIPA's view is that we have to ensure that overdue moves toward routine release and the use of technology to make government information more widely available must also make this information usable for all Canadians. Canadians must also have the ability to request specific information from their government and receive that information in a reasonable time at no or minimal cost. This means creating a functional access to information system. No one wants to head toward a dystopia where governments push out information electronically which no one uses or trusts, while occasional WikiLeaks type leaks, document dumps raise the issue of serious damage to legitimate state business or personal interests. We hope that your work on open government will be a big step toward bringing about real openness in government. Thank you.
Mr. Gogolek, we're now going to go to the first round of questioning, and we're going to start with Dr. Bennett, 7 minutes.
Thanks very much. Thank you. This was very helpful, and particularly I think the interactive piece is of huge interest in terms of what actually this idea that you not just put the data up, but you actually actively engage Canadians, which the Information Commissioner, when she was here, said that was one of the sort of 5 principles that she felt were important, that you would involve the public in any consultations. Now, as you know, that we're hoping that we can incorporate that principle into the study as we sort of go forward with the e-consultation to ask citizens to help us with this in terms of what they would want to see in a federal government open government policy. And so I guess I would like to know, how you would recommend that we did that. And if you had any ideas what recommendations you would have, but for obviously drilling down into civil society and into the places that have expertise that you've talked about, but also in terms of young Canadians and using their enthusiasm and savvy to solve problems in this new collaborative way. So, I mean, if you were us, what would you be doing?
I guess the key thing for me is, it's never really good practice to do a consultation where you're not very clear on what you need to know about need to know from Canadians, and as well, it's not a good idea to have a consultation in which information and background and context for people isn't well developed and understood and presented in ways that are accessible and usable. I think you want to try and structure. You would want to try and have a structured conversation, so a lot of different perspectives can come forward, from the perspective of public service, from the perspective of advocacy groups, from the perspective of developers, the software communities, and others, and try and sort of show the spectrum of things that open government and open data as a piece of that in particular can really mean for the country. And within that, you can start to look at what are the big questions when you begin to examine that and present that to people in a way that's really simple for them to access, really clear, very quick if possible, but also offers an opportunity to draw them into deeper conversations, maybe face-to-face conversations in their communities. Maybe offers them chances to kind of bring groups of people together to talk to one another, to report that back in creative ways, in different ways, through video, not necessarily through text, right? Through audio, other forms of presentation back to the committee about what the possibilities are, what the concerns are, these kinds of issues. So I think that would be a great place to start, to be clear about what the process needs, what kind of information and what kind of questions it really needs, where those will be going, how they will be used, and how you as a committee can report back to Canadians about what you've heard from them and how it's incorporated well into the process. So that would be my advice.
And is there a best practice that you can think of? I mean, obviously in a library that you would want on the website of things that if people are interested they could read, and it sounds like from David Eves that the Australian report, there'd be a number of things on a sort of reading list we would put up there to bring people up to speed. And when we did this study in 2002-3 at the Disability Committee, we had sort of the three tools, an issue poll, a tell us your story, and then a present your solution kind of thing. Is there a process that you've seen in terms of developing open government that you really liked? Obviously, Toronto had a process. Maybe David would tell us a little bit about that. And I guess, so if you would, to the clerk later, give maybe a reading list, a best practices in terms of process, but then anybody else that you think that we could talk to. Obviously, you mentioned Don Lenihan and Tad Homer-Dixon, which I guess we could, maybe, Mr. Chair, have a look at. But do you think that in innovative ways that the committee should consider a conference, a way of bringing people together to thrash things out? At that disability one, we actually brought some of the neat people we'd met online together to look at the draft report, which was the first time that I think that had ever been done in Parliament. But
it was Beth Novak, who was the director of the Open Government Initiative in the White House, has recently left the White House and is now a professor at New York University. She helped lead some very significant consultations with the public about open data, transparency, helped develop that fed into the Obama administration's Open Government Directive, how that was structured, and those included conferences, those included online brainstorming, as well as another means. So if she's available and somebody that if you can bring her, I would definitely recommend that you get Beth up here. She's sort of a hero of mine, so I'd love to watch her talk too.
In terms of our experience in Toronto, one of the surprises we had is we didn't really know back in 2008 what was the power of Web 2, Gov 2, and open data was just starting to become a popular term, although proactive routine disclosure nomenclature has been around for quite a long time, obviously. So we planned a summit, and I partnered with one of our deputy city managers, Sue Cork, and what we did was we were trying to educate our people and get some insights from some developers and community people and councillors and industry people. We also decided to open it up just to see if we could find out what this new Twitter thing could do. And so we had about 300 people attend, and at the end there was over 1,200 people, 900 people online, just participating in a constant Twitter feed, and we were taking actually more questions from out there than actually in the room. And it just opened our eyes up in terms of the amount of interest, in terms of, again, this two-way street of government versus just the push-out that they were actually wanted to be involved. And what came out of that was also this challenge from Mark Sermon and this unconference approach. And what an unconference approach is that you don't go in there with, I mean, you go in there with some structure, but you don't go in there with too much structure. You go in with a wallboard of ideas and themes, and you work with a conference to build the program from the themes. And you have breakout groups and discussions. So we had one of these, we call them change camps. I think there was some up here. And we had this at the Mars building, which is in Toronto, which is a medical research area. And we just had an amazing amount of people from the public directly come out and chat with us, whiteboard, and work with us. Right from there, we gained a lot. And then there was a lot more. There was a MESH conference and many others, the recent hackathon I mentioned, and so on. Each of these encounters opened us up, not just the developers, but day-to-day people, children and teachers and community leaders that wanted to be involved. So it's a very powerful forum. Don't over-structure it. Allow the messiness, if you like, of Web 2, Gov 2, and open data to take its form to inform you. Certainly have clear purpose and clear report back on value, but don't overcomplicate the process itself. Let it grow and let it be evolving, and that's what we found to be very, very helpful, because it then opened our eyes and we didn't come in with naturally forming restrictions. We came in with a viewpoint of we want to learn, and we continue to look for that on our website and different lines of business every day. So that's something that we found. We certainly can offer some of the reports from that. There's the people that spoke at those various meetings. Mark Kinczynski is a good example in Toronto, who's a developer who's done a lot of work, helped found the datato.org site and so on. David Eves, of course, there's many different of those advocates, but there's just day-to-day people that want to be involved and improve things too.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bennett and Madame Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Hume, and Mr. Wallace, and Mr. Gogolek. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. It's very interesting. I must say, Mr. Hume, that what you have presented here is a full text, and it can be used for the development of policies, which is really interesting. But with regard to what I want to hear from you today is your personal experience in New Zealand, because you went to New Zealand and you met with parliamentarians to put in place open data, and I'd like to hear your comments on this. I also have a question then for Mr. Wallace, as well as for you, Mr. Hume, for all three of you. Currently, you're bringing forward expertise of what you've done in your respective jurisdictions. Mr. Wallace comes from a municipal area, and you heard from a lot of people. We've heard from a lot of people from the municipal regions. I've worked with Moncton, Vancouver, Toronto, and this to improve your procedures in terms of access. So is there kind of partnership or collaboration, if you will, to ensure that more services can be provided? This is in terms of municipalities. And then, Mr. Hume, I know that you're here personally, but you have more of a provincial experience. You are more familiar with provincial issues. It's extremely interesting. That is how you see, and Mr. Guglick, you can also respond, how you see this transfer in terms of what you are doing at the municipal level and at the provincial level, and how you can see this work at the federal level, because we clearly understand the service this can provide and the use it can be. At a municipal level, it's extremely accessible. Mr. Eves, in fact, gave us quite exhaustive testimony on Monday on the practical aspects of the use being made within the municipality. But with regard to the use that can be made at the provincial and federal level, and the federal level is here, I'd like to hear your comments on this and have your personal expertise on this and how we could, where we could go forward with this. Starting from the premise, of course, that we must have political will, the political will needed to do this.
So if I could start on the New Zealand question first.
Oui, sur la Nouvelle-Zélande.
When I went to New Zealand, I was there working as a consultant with the State Services Commission, which is sort of an oversight body, kind of close, I think, to Treasury Board Secretariat here, focuses on public sector management. And in particular, I was working with the e-government program there in New Zealand. This was back in 2006. At the time, they were advancing ideas around, one of the key streams in their e-government strategy as a public service was the idea of participation. And a key gap that I think is clear in most jurisdictions is trying to understand how well members of parliament actually manage to cope with all of the input that they get from the public around when the public does engage. I'm highly sympathetic to members of Parliament in the challenges that they have around information management, and the challenges that they have in terms of hearing from the public, how they understand what comes into them when people communicate with me. I remember sitting across the table from a cabinet minister who had just recently come from a television interview and had wound up with 6,000 emails in his inbox in the moments after his television interview. And the question was, as a function of good governance, how is that member and that minister going to be? Can they really listen when there's that much information? I think open data in particular has a huge potential for members of parliament, not only in terms of their role as scrutiny of government, in their role in terms of holding government to account, but also I think good information management practices that are embedded in things like open data can make your jobs a lot easier if you know if you can bring this data together.
I appreciate what you're saying, but my question specifically was to know with regard to the federal government, because New Zealand, it was the state, the federal government, what kind of applications, because we understand what's happening at the municipal level and the services and the information being passed through to the public. There's research that's being funded by public services and public funds and so forth, statistics, and we realize that, and I know that we want to have a consultation in order to understand what people want. I'd like to have your opinion. What kind of data? Because we can restrict access to data. We can give the information that we want. I'd like to hear your comments on this. What should be in a federal open government?
Question is what sort of data should the federal government start with?
Oui.
Okay. I think there's my own sense of that is certainly you should start with whatever you're publishing, organizing whatever you're publishing already, and bring that together I would certainly recommend you look closely at Statistics Canada data that has some profound implications for how Canadians understand the nation. I'd also be, I think, data that I've seen says that most people are very interested in public safety issues. So understanding any data related to public safety, I think, would also be incredibly powerful and useful. So those are a few places to start. I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
If I might suggest, the federal government is not giving a lot of services directly to the public, Veterans Affairs, Aboriginal Affairs, but there are billions in fiscal transfers between the two levels of government, that is, between the federal government and the provinces and other entities. Having that data, the types of transfers, the amounts for which, what it's used for, the reports from the other governments, how the federal funds were used, why, how. This would give us an idea of the efficiency of the federal system. And I just am throwing this out there as an indication of the type of data that perhaps we could look at in a format where those who are interested, the public, can look at them and have different ways of interpreting them. You're talking about having access to raw data, data that we already have, data that we're bringing to the public's attention, but there are also tools that the public uses with regard to the cyber democracy. How do you see the transition between the two? In my opinion, the public, Canadians, have to be involved. If we're creating a system of open government, then all Canadians must have access, and not just in terms of the fact that I can find a computer in a public library and look at it. In fact, it has to be in a format where it would be useful and I can use it without having to have a degree in computer science.
And I want to thank all of the presenters for what you've brought to the table this afternoon. It's all been very helpful. Mr. Hume, I wanted to ask you, I'm struggling with a little, I understand that there's great potential here, and that it's sort of a new area, the open, and especially around open data. And I appreciated hearing about the apps for climate action process and contest. And I know Mr. Eves the other day talked about the van trash application that was developed as well. And we've heard about other apps that have been developed. And I get that there's some use to those. Some of them are just kind of fun. Some of them are kind of cool. Some of them don't strike me as major moves forward to solving major issues. And you talked about how this could be an opportunity for public collaboration in solving some major problems. So could you say more, or give an example where on a sort of a larger public policy issue there's been a significant change because of some use of open data?
Let me go. It's a tough one to answer because it is quite new. Mm-hmm. I think that what we're getting right now is people are learning to understand that the resources available, mm-hmm. and I think especially for public servants who are working, who are just beginning to work in this area, there's they've got some questions that they know that it's useful, but there needs to be some innovation and some creativity applied mm-hmm. before I think we're really gonna hit that mark. Mm-hmm. I think that the idea, I think the biggest challenge, and I think this is the most fundamental thing, is the switch from thinking that as governments we're kind of in an industrial kind of business where we pull all the raw materials and we shoot the car out the other end. Mm-hmm. I think we're kind of increasingly need public servants who have the ability to think broadly and collaboratively and bring people together on an ongoing kind of basis, so that there's energy and movement. I think that what I've seen on my experience in leading sessions using open data is it creates a really profoundly focused kind of public discussion, mm-hmm. in that you get people who at certain points would disagree on a particular issue, but when the data is in front of them that expresses a particular reality, mm-hmm. They're much more inclined to engage each other in a really solutions-focused kind of way. That's just what I've seen in sort of working in sessions.
So, Mr. Wallace, I saw you shaking your head, but I wonder if the budget visualization is sort of a next step in this kind of process. I mean, could you, and it's something that I haven't seen, so I wonder if you could say a little bit more about what that looks like and how that helps public policy development, or how that helps a city come up with a better budget kind of thing.
Well, I think that's a very good question. This, as David's saying, this is all new. And in our budget world, we've always produced budget reports, usually in PDF, sitting up on the, it's nice to look at, but you can't do much with it. And if you wanted to get and use the data, you'd have to then be a programmer, scrape it, and do some type of work, and then do a lot of work to actually then mash it up and do work with it. What the visualization approach, there's two sides of it. One is make the data very easy to use, so you can use the data from the budget to explore different ways and ask sensible questions about your local community or about your government. I know federal government's a bit more arm's length, but there's a lot of important information, Statistics Canada, of course, budget information and performance aspects and so on. And there's large decisions being made with lots of money, taxpayers' money. At the municipal level, there's a lot of engagement around what's also happening in the local community. And so the visualization is a way of seeing what's happening across the city in different wards, different kinds of requests, different kinds of variances and different kinds of things happening in the different communities, and people can start to then grow together and work together to help solve those community issues. So the visualization is a much easier way and allows sort of a ready-made way of helping you understand the data better versus where you would have to be in the past, someone who would have to actually construct all that yourself. So one of the things we're hearing over the last few years and more is about the ability to mash it up and look at it very quickly, but with not a lot of computer science or detailed needs. If you think of teenagers and people in doing school projects or people who want to be engaged at that age where we want to bring young people in, if they have to have a computer science degree, that's not going to be very easy for them to be involved. What we've seen is young people involved from schools and new civic engagement links because people can do it easily. So the concept of getting the budget out there, because it is so fundamental, also allows people to see that the government is now delivering on its promises and being able to cut those costs or improve services and offer better services, and perhaps with better services from that direct input from the clients.
So you get better informed citizens because of this process. How does it change the decision maker's role?
I think from our experience, again, we're just starting in this space where there's this two-way street. And I think what people are saying is, in our case, where are those efficiencies? Could there be more efficiencies? Maybe I've got an idea on some type of service delivery that we could do in the community that could help the strapped resources in the government. So maybe there's a way that my company, my service, my idea, my innovation could augment what's already being done to provide even a better service. We saw this, interestingly enough, through some of the United Way and those kind of community areas where there were people right out in the streets working with homeless and so on who were there all the time. And they in fact supplied information back up into us where our social workers could, there's only so many of them, actually gave us even more in-depth information for the communities. So there was an actual transfer of data back from these local efforts. So then they look at the budget and they say, well, wait a minute, if we work with you, you could actually take that money and spread it around or do this, and we could actually make services better. So it helps engage people in the budget debate, not just saying from a finished product perspective, as David is saying, from an assembly line, let's look at the budget at the end, but during its formation. And because budget is always evolving, you have a say in not just the next one, but even how the money is being spent right today. So that's sort of the concept of making that budget data very available, very usable.
But I'm struggling a little bit with the role of decision makers, the councillor who's actually going to vote. You engage all these citizens in this process. You give them all this information. You're going to generate interest, obviously. You're going to generate a certain amount of opinion, not necessarily well thought out opinion, that kind of thing. How does an elected person sort through all of that? Like, what resources do they get, do they need to do that kind of work? Does it increase the pressure on that decision maker? Does it change their job in some way because of this kind of process?
A very good question. And there's no question that it opens up the doors. But they get many, many calls today in, I'll call them more traditional means. Many, many emails, which they never actually get to. And in this way, if people are more informed and can ask questions and be involved more that they can understand, then in fact what happens is that they actually are more informed and they actually can be in better debate and assist with their local politician. So what it means is that you get a more efficient exchange, a more informed exchange, versus someone who is just asking a blank question because they just don't understand the workings of government. They actually be part of the process of government.
Thank you.
Mr. Albrecht, 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to also thank our, our witnesses for being here today. This has certainly been an engaging topic we've embarked on, and I think there's a pretty wide agreement that we need to move ahead with this as quickly as possible, but your input has certainly been valuable. I want to focus most of my questions toward Mr. Wallace. I certainly appreciate the summary that you've given us here, and just working through some of the different apps that you've highlighted, whether it's restaurant inspection reports or transportation schedules or even the visualization. I certainly see a lot of value in that. But I want to come back to page 6 of your presentation primarily, where you focus on, you use the term open government. And I think many of our witnesses have tried to help us understand there's a difference between open data and open government. And you make a number of statements here that I'd just like to follow up on. You say open government it's not just offering data sets on the web, it's much more than that. You talk about civic engagement and so on. And then further down on that page, you talk about the full record of council and committee decisions posted during the meetings. I'm wondering if you would have an idea as to how many people are actually tracking with the meeting while it's going on. And then in the final paragraph, you talk about public participation in the decision-making process is increasing, and certainly that has to be our end goal, public participation. The number of deputations at council has increased from 2,000 in 2007 to 4,100 in 2010. My question sort of follows up on what Mr. Sixay was getting at in terms of the number of deputations, 4,100. Obviously, most of those were online, and possibly some of them were delegations appearing before council. I don't know if you would have numbers on that, but how do you handle that volume? And then subsequent to that is, how can we be sure that those deputations that are arriving, first of all, are they read? Secondly, if they're read, are they absorbed, and is there any potential for action on them? Is there a staff member or multiple staff members assigned to deal with those things? A lot of questions surrounding that. Are we increasing expectations unrealistically and possibly shortchanging the process somewhere along the line? Hope you could follow my line of thinking there.
Yes, I think I understand it. Let me know if I don't answer your question. I don't think there's anything ever wrong with opening up the doors wider.
Right.
The fact is at the municipal level, there are many people that come and do deputations. They get 5 minutes and they make their point.
Right.
They've been doing that since town hall meetings, and then now in the electronic age, we're now engaging them through this meeting management system where they can put it through on email, and in the future we're going to have it in terms of perhaps even web chats, and who knows. One of the things you get from this, and we have in our clerks area ways of looking at the types of input that's coming in. What are the themes of input? What are the areas of concern? There are many input elements, but there are many like areas of focus. And one of the visualization techniques is, as you get and receive the information in, you can start to see what the patterns are and where the interest areas are. Then you can engage the public and drill further down and say, let's explore that topic and let's talk about it, and perhaps even have a focus session just on that topic. And so what happens is that you get this much more two-way street. In the old days, you would come and say your piece. You'd say, thank you very much, record it. You'd take some element from it, I'm sure, because you get a sense of the feeling out there, but you'd never really get a sense of what exactly it meant to the larger issues. If you can now start to get to where you can see the patterns and work with that, especially in an electronic way, then you can start to work intelligently with all that input. And what knowledge-based systems can allow you to do, technology can help us here, is they can look for those patterns and say, here's a couple of injunction points that perhaps this standing committee on planning and growth or economics or environment really needs to explore further. And maybe we need to look at some of the things that were in our capital plan, even though we're in the middle of the year, and say, wait a minute, do we have the right investments? Or do we need to make some changes? So you get a better pulse on the citizens. Now, in the federal level, it's very challenging because you've got a country to work with. But that's where your partners in the other levels of governments can help, because they can funnel up some of the issues. A good example is people who don't have identity, and how do we give them benefits, and how do we provide proper care to them, and how does that work when the federal level says you must have identity to have a bank account, and yet we have challenges. So we're working on that problem, but we're working with our provincial level and up at the federal level to say, how do we make sure that we can equally engage these people who don't really have a voice today? So this is how we work with that. And I think one of the most exciting things is when you see that in 2007, that the page views on the website in this area was 0.
How come that
and
be?
now we have 1 point, because we just had very basic information. And so people never went there, quite frankly.
So in 2007,
In that area, talking about meeting management, looking it up.
Okay, on this one particular.
View. And now today we have it available on BlackBerry. Okay. You can go and you can look at the calendar, have a two-way street semantic calendar. In other words, it's not just PDFs anymore of reports you could download and somehow work your way through. You have a very flexible way of getting in on what's going on in your government at that moment.
Okay. Do I still have some time?
1 minute.
Okay. I understand the idea of assimilating the patterns and themes from the input, but we've discussed or used the term two-way street often in our conversation today, and I think that's appropriate and important. What kind of feedback or response then do those 4,100 can they expect to receive a personal response to all of that as well?
I'll give you an example where we actually used some Web 2 technology to, once we got a certain sense of, on Jarvis Street, what people were feeling about how the streetscape should change. There was a project going on to change how the streetscape was going to look. Removal of the center lane and some changes to the way that it was looking, and safety elements and so on. So the Transportation Department decided to use Facebook to go out there and solicit information. And instead of having the similar people come to the same old meetings again and again, they even got to know them by first names. It actually opened up, especially to young people, a whole new space of, this is what I'd like to see on the street. And so there was a lot of different information, but they were able to open it up and get a lot better. As a result, they directly fed back up on the site the comments they were receiving. People took that and built further on it, and you got this collaborative spirit of shaping that street. At the end of the day, then they fed back and said, here's what we're now doing with the design. What do you think about that? And then they got further design, and by the time they got to actually doing it, it became very popular because people saw that they were being listened to. I think that you can't just use traditional tools. You have to expand by using the Gov2 or Web2 tools also, and go out to the people in their own environment and work with them directly. I give an example here of the firefighters, where they were having a real problem. They couldn't get new firefighters. But the real issue they were concerned about was misuse of information on the web, was being scraped, and people are looking at the mean time for a fire truck to get to a site, and it was wrong. They said, we want to go on Facebook and put the right data up, and we want to show that it's authorized. So that's why they did. But in the process of doing it, they said, by the way, if you're interested in joining the Toronto Fire Department, here's a link and so on. All of a sudden, all these people became interested in being firefighters, where they just couldn't get anyone interested before. So it had a completely different purpose because they were reaching out in the community. So using the new techniques and new knowledge tools can help you deal with all that information, but also allow government people and politicians make better decisions, I think, in the long term.
Thank you very much, Mr. Albrecht. That, colleagues, concludes the first round. Before we go to the second round, just one issue I want to explore briefly with you, Mr. Wallace. I believe you mentioned in your opening comments that since you went to a more open government format within the City of Toronto management, that your access to information requests have dropped significantly. Did I hear you say that?
Yes.
And what percentage are we talking about?
About 50%.
And that, do you have any idea of the savings in money? Would that be, can you give us a ballpark? I know you don't have the exact.
That's not that easy to calculate because you're talking about people's time and so on. One of the things we've discovered, and our city clerk is probably best Yuli Waka's best to answer this because her area deals with it. But from what I know in dealing with these kind of complex areas, because I'm in IT, I have to delve through thousands of emails and different kinds of unstructured data to help answer requests sometimes. And that spends my staff's time thousands of hours. And all you need to look at is that they could be working on projects. So we do have some numbers. I can get that information back to you if you like.
I think that would be beneficial if we could
but
have
I
that
think
information.
there's definite time savings when you look at in a year where you had 4,100, now you have 2,100, just the amount. But there's also less of these ambiguous requests and more focused requests. And they're a lot easier to answer and shorter to do. So because people can find the irregular information or the wider information in other means now, then the reasons, and when they do come to you, they're very well prepared, and it's easy to get that information to them. So even when you're answering FOI requests, it's more efficient, even when you do have to use that process. But it's still a challenging process, and I think that Vincent was very right in that there's still a lot of room to improve on that area, but we believe that proactive disclosure and routine disclosure means, and the open data can really help and has helped us. So there has definitely been productivity gains, and I can get you more information in that light.
If you could, we'd appreciate that. Okay, we're going to start the second round. 5 minutes, Mr. Bagnall.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming. I have a bunch of questions, so if we have really quick answers, so I get through them all. The first one's very simple, though, really basics. At Toronto, do you list all the employees and their phone numbers? And the Yukon government does that, and it's easy to find people. But the federal government in that city, there are some offices, they won't give out a phone number. If they go 1-800 number to Ottawa, I got a call yesterday, someone very frustrated that they couldn't phone the office in their hometown. They had to go to a 1-800 number. It was Revenue Canada. Do you have all your staff and their phone numbers? For most people that have a phone?
The entire org chart and information is there, but we basically invite people through our 311 service to basically ask any question they want, and they hook up the people through that service. We used to have at least 40 different access points, different phone numbers for, I got a tax question or I got a water main break or something. And it was very complex. So we have found the 311 one number access point has been a huge
And that would,
wave.
if someone had a pothole problem, that's where they'd call?
That's right. And so instead of remembering, oh, it was Fred I dealt with last time, I better go back to Fred to solve my problem, I just go through 311 and you get an answer. So it's less to do with specific people and more to do with the service that you're getting in terms of our level. However, there are certainly areas of specific specialty and interest. And so, the engineers and IT people and privacy lawyers and those kind of things, they are available. You can get access to that information. Again, that is something that is not difficult to get and easily accessible in terms of who to speak to. But what we've found is there's less to do with that now and more to do just through 311, and then it's an organized way of getting the information back to the or servicing the public.
Okay, Vincent, you made a good point about it's great to have it there, but you need to figure out the accessibility of it. I think 10 years ago, Industry Canada had 250,000 pages on its website, and I worked in that area and I didn't even use the website because you wouldn't know where to find anything. So and the federal government, of course, huge. It's only one of 50 departments and agencies. So that's an important point, I assume, is how you negotiate these things, navigate these things.
Yeah, it has to be available, we think, to citizens. It can't just be the digerati. It can't just be people who are sophisticated users. It has to be available to citizens. It has to be in a format that they are able to use. I'm assuming that the 250,000 pages were all in 10-point courier type as well for ease of reading.
And along the same line, newspaper editors say you have to write a newspaper for grade 10 or grade 8 because that's the average Canadian citizen, which is a lot lower than people would think. How many people do you think have the ability to navigate your various websites, the education and the technical ability?
Well, I could start. We have found that most people have a number of basic purposes to come to the website. First of all, they have a service that they need to have done. I want to register this, I want to do this, I want to do that. So we tried it through the 301 self-service part of our website, say, what's your request? What do you need? Very simple. Other people come because they need information. They want to say, I want to find out about something happening in my community coming up. And what we're working towards is a My Toronto capability where anything you're interested in, you're always interested. When you go back in, it's always there. And the third reason people are interested is that they want to be involved, as we said earlier, in their local government. They want to take part. They want to be involved in some of the decision making and so on. And they want that to be an interactive way, and they want to, as we said earlier, see that their input made a difference. So the websites that we're rapidly moving towards is organized in an easy to access point from that perspective, and this whole navigation perspective. And what we do is, believe it or not, we went out to the libraries, we went out to donut shops, we went out to the guy in the street, and we said, what do you think of the website? After a lot of noise, we said, oh, thank you very much. And then we said, put your comments online. And so we opened up in a Web 2 perspective. We got lots of input so that we started evolving and making the website better. We still got some work to do. We also have 50,000 static web pages to then bring into a dynamic content. That we are actually working with some advanced tools out into our business areas, and they themselves are going to start putting the data in themselves versus having to go through communications people, which means it'll be much faster to get relevant, up-to-date data. So together, the new tools and better organized websites itself based on those three basic uses and listening to people and how to improve access is helping make navigation better and information on that website more relevant for their use.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bagwell. Ms. Davidson, 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks very much to each of our presenters for being here this afternoon. Certainly we're getting, I think, a good feel of your different perspectives as you envision open data and open government. So it's been extremely interesting. One of the things that I know that we discuss and we wrestle with as a committee is how we are going to roll this out. How are we going to determine what needs to be in it? What's important to the Canadian public? How they should be able to interact with us as we go into this exercise and provide open data and open government process. Is there a role to be played by the electronic world that we live in today through Twitter and Facebook, or are we looking at, and is that a viable way of getting information back to us from the public, do you think? Could each of you comment on that?
I would say the answer is yes, provided you're ready and willing to be able to capture that information, sort through it, and begin to work with it. And that you're also ready and willing to begin to engage in conversations with people, and that Twitter and Facebook can be remarkable push technologies, but they can also be remarkable from the perspective of hearing back and forth and opening certain kinds of discussion. Twitter being Twitter, you only get 140 characters, so it's not necessarily going to be deep, but that's okay, because what it can do is actually you can use it as a really terrific kind of pointing tool to focus people on more discursive kind of content that might be housed on a website somewhere, or pointing people to an event that they can attend, highlight other kinds of resources that you're examining, point people to the Parvu kind of website to let them know that these kinds of conversations are happening. So I'd say that provided you understand your strategy in terms of the kinds of things that you want to do for people and what kind of conversations you want to lead, I think they can be remarkably helpful for you.
Believe it or not, we use Twitter in a number of ways. We have an OpenTO Twitter account where we post, as we listen to the community, we trial balloon out some ideas and types of data that we're thinking of putting out there, and ideas, and seeing what people think about that. And it's a great way, as David's saying, of feeling the pulse and understanding it in short bursts, but you certainly get it quickly. You also get some very quick reactions, so you don't have to go through these long drawn-out interplays, you know very quickly what's actually happening. Another aspect, believe it or not, our 311 Twitter area, they're actually keeping their finger on the pulse for another reason. If they're starting to see a lot of a theme developing out on Twitter, they actually could go and say, wait a minute, let's go put someone out there if there's graffiti or puddles or something and actually go out and fix it before there's actually a request come in terms of a proactive service request. And what that does is they also have a technology that says there were 3,000 people that asked for the same thing. Let's do it once. So what Twitter does is it actually allows you to see what is happening out there. And you get a sense of it in terms of the day-to-day and minute-to-minute goings on in your local community. Now, you could also expand that out, but I agree, you have to understand it. And so you have to start to understand the types of language and the way that you can leverage it and use the different kinds of hashes and different ways that you could do it. There's interesting, we worked with the UT on some ideas around perhaps putting some metadata around Twitter and tweets, and to get a sense of what we could do to improve the depth of it. It's a very short burst, but is there a way, and there's ways you can put links and all that so you could see it, what people are really getting to in a deeper sense. But is there a way to actually make the feed itself more intelligent? So there's some thinking that's going on in that space which could even improve it further. But in its current state, it's still incredibly useful. The themes and rooms out there of discussions are great to follow. And like I said, we're using it in a number of ways, both testing what we're doing out there, but also monitoring out there to see what's happening so we can proactively service the citizens.
Just a very short. I just have a very short comment. One is that you should not rely exclusively, I don't expect that you will, rely exclusively on Twitter and Facebook. The other thing is to come back to a theme that Mr. Hume and Mr. Wallace raised earlier, which is that you constantly need to go back and see what people are saying and what new information they might want, changes they might want to see. So it's an ongoing process.
Thank you very much, Ms. Davidson and Madame Tilak.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming here today to testify and give us your expertise as well as your opinion, and to take an interest in this study that we're implementing at the federal level in order to ensure more open government. Of course, we've had a lot of comparisons from the very beginning with regard to countries like Australia, US, and Great Britain, but these are all countries where there's just one language that is spoken, and therefore they don't have a substantial challenge as Canada has with the Official Languages Act and the implementation of the open government, because those countries only had one language. My question is for Mr. Wallace. In your access to information requests, when someone asks you for translation, how does it work? Do they give you the document in the original language and Toronto translates it, or does the citizen themselves have to get the document translated in order to have it translated?
We do receive, in fact, we receive a 311, 180 different languages. We have capability for translation to receive requests for services. So we have very much a way of, because Toronto is such a multicultural, we have further challenges than just two languages. We have at least 180 that we're working with in different dialects and so on. So in fact, we can receive requests in all those various languages, and we have professional translation services to support that. We also aim to deliver out the request in the language it came in through, if it comes in through the official process. Some of the challenges is, though, the website itself. And the website, we allow for different translation capability, but we put a disclaimer on it because through Google Translation and so on, it's not perfect translation. But it's better than if you didn't have it, but we put the disclaimer up so you understand that. But what we have found with that is that in itself is generated more interest in different languages. So I would say if Canada absolutely agree that other countries with single languages perhaps may not have the same challenge that Canada at the federal level has, but at the municipal level with the multitudes of different levels of service that we have to do in many different languages, we have to be prepared to work on all those perspectives. So I would say that we don't have an official 180 language act. We don't have that in all our different documentation, all those different things. And you have that challenge at this level in the 2 languages. But I think being able to receive it and understand the person in the way in their language and give the information back is a good start. The website will still be a challenge, and searches and so on in those languages in the pure electronic mode. But in assist mode, which 311 offers or the FOI process offers, we see that working quite well. So that's how we deal with it today at the city.
Mr. Chair, you talked about earlier, Mr. Wallace, the drop in 50% of the access to information requests you got, and talked about the costs. I'd like to ask you this question. What is your annual budget with regard to the amount for access to information requests and to put in place a more transparent structure for government? What is the annual budget that is dedicated to this program?
Again, that's in the in the clerk's area. There's a group that's devoted to corporate information management service, which deals with records management, but also freedom of information requests. So there is a budget of the people that work there. Again, that information is available actually up online, but I will get that for you so you have that focused information. So there are professionals that deal with that, and then there's the time of people in the programs to source the information. So there's more than just the budget of that area. There would be also the people who have to provide the information from the programs. So, as I said earlier, we can look at what we can estimate what those savings would be just based on past experience of how long it took and how much effort, and also in the IT area of how much processing we have to do to find and search all of the emails. In some cases, go back years. So there's a lot of processing that we do, and that takes away from our day-to-day work and servicing the public and so on. So again, more data up online, the less of that is. And so more transparent means a lot of savings in many different ways and better services. So I can get you some estimates on that, and also the budget of the area that actually processes. Now, we don't expect that area to shrink because they do a lot of different things. But the amount of coverage they can do, and again, because the kind of requests are coming in are more focused now, because they can get the rest of the information, these more general requests, up on the open data and other parts of the web, it means that the professionals can deal with the ones and deal with them quicker because they're more focused. So there's another value that's not just saving money, but in fact giving better service. So I want to again to underline the value point that even though we're getting less, we're getting more focused requests, and that by the very nature it improves the response that we can give out to the public. But I can certainly, as I said earlier, supply the estimated savings from that, and also the budget information of how we do the processing today.
Merci.
Okay, merci, Madame Tilak. Mr. Abbott, 5 minutes.
Thank you, and again, thank you to our witnesses. There's one area that we haven't touched on at all today, and I'm thinking of the issue of public safety or security. With the access of information, that information is available to the Toronto 17 or other people who have very malicious intent for our society. What thought has been put into all of these offerings that you've given us, and they're excellent, but I haven't heard anything at all about the precautions that must be built in, and indeed, are there precautions built in?
Yes, there actually is a lot of precautions built in, because that's a very good point. So, for example, linear inventory is not provided. You can't see how many kilometers of piping or electrical or any of that information is never going to be allowed online. An engineer could apply through a proper process and be fully validated and so on, but that type of information is not, or utilities information, what's under the pavement is not exposed on the open data perspective. There's another type of information that some American cities, most American cities, are starting to think about putting up there, and it's called crime data. And in fact, if you go to New York, you can actually see who's being accused and all kinds of stuff. From a privacy perspective, that is something that when we have worked through in our civic engagement group has worked with the police, that's just not doable and is something that from a Canadian perspective is not acceptable. So what we do, though, is that we create what we call neighborhood indicators. And they're based on various factors and different characteristics. And you can get a reading in a neighborhood of what's going on in there in terms of not just crime, but other elements, economics, and so on. So it gives you in a form with all the information around it, what is the experience, what's happening, but the raw, detailed information that is in the police files and so on stays exactly there. So we've taken a tremendous amount of precaution. Once we were challenged in 2008 to do it, we took a year to prepare and really go through the details with our clerks, with our civic engagement, talking with the police, the community people, and so on, to really prepare and understand how could we do this. We also looked at the examples that were out there. Most information that's open is GIS information or maps. And that's because people want to know where something is. But it's also the easiest information to get out there. And that's why you see the explosion on Google Maps and so on. But that only goes so far. People want to know what the characteristics and what's really going on in their neighborhood. And that's where these neighborhood wellness indicators and other elements are helpful. But they don't disclose public safety issues. H1N1, all of the clinic information was up there, but obviously the health results and what was going on wasn't. So we work with our chief medical officer and all the different divisions and agencies to make sure, and they are the ones who pull the switch. They do the quality checklist. They're the ones who release the data. They get advice from clerks. They get advice from the information professionals. They talk to IT on the technical aspects, but they're the ones to say that data is ready to go. And that's why through that very detailed and ongoing consultation, what is up there is right, and it's got the proper metadata, and we know that it's serving the public in all the possible ways, along with making the government itself more transparent, but in a proper way, in a way that is fulfilling our obligation to the citizens.
I think it's also important to look at to not try and reinvent the wheel. Under the Access to Information Act, we've looked at a number of important governmental and societal issues. In the instance of public safety, obviously we don't want organized crime to be able to put in an ETHI request to the RCMP and say, I want a list of all informants in the United Nations gang. Well, clearly they wouldn't get that because the law would prevent that. And I would think that this is that putting similar considerations into the release of open data, and Mr. Wallace could perhaps comment on that, that you would look at it through those same exemptions. Would this damage international relations? Would this violate privilege? Would it reveal a cabinet confidence? I think that we don't have to go back and reinvent the wheel. We can look at it through the same perspective.
Exactly. Comments on security issues. A quick same question, but with respect to the potential use of this volume of information, the ease of access for malicious purposes. And I'm not thinking security now. I'm thinking personally malicious purposes. What thought goes into what appears in this cache of information?
Sure. I guess one of the things that you have to realize is that certainly when you're looking at data sets, your personal privacy is alongside public safety is going to be one of the key things that you're going to examine. Data, and this is common practice, common data management practice. So when we think about things like Statistics Canada or Canada Revenue Agency and the level of granular detail that they have available to them, they issue reports, but they're done in an aggregated way, and there's a deep practice of anonymization around data sets that is possible and has been in place for many, many years because of privacy implications. So that will be a key criteria for how for in looking at new data sets that you'd be publishing. But I think the good news on that front is that while they may be concentrated in specific areas that are already really sophisticated about data production and collection and publishing, those practices are really well known, well respected, and well understood.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Abbott. We're now going to move on to Mr. Sexay for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I want to go to Mr. Golek and ask a number of questions, and I really appreciate the fact that you drew us back to the importance of the ETHI process in when we're considering the broader perspective on open government, open data. And I like the push and pull metaphor that you use, because I think that's very important for us to remember, and that's not going to disappear in terms of even the best possible model of open government or open data. I wanted to ask you to go over the BC Ferries situation with me a little bit, because I don't quite understand, or maybe I do, but I'll pretend I don't, that it seems like a good thing that BC Ferries, when they have data or information that's to be disclosed, puts it up on their website so that everybody can see it. But you point that out as a problem. So maybe could you say a bit more about why that's a problem for your organization, and are there other examples of how that's proven to be a problem?
Well, I'll try and go through it very briefly. Our initial reaction was cautiously optimistic when we heard that they were going to be putting requests up online, because this is a good thing. This is there was the CARES system existed federally, and that, as I noted in my written brief, should be replaced. But as more and more details became available, it became increasingly obvious that the system was designed not so much to increase transparency as to really make things difficult for certain requesters. And we've started to see more and more information. The fact that BC Ferries does not just put the information up on the website. They also issue a news release telling other news media that, well, the Vancouver Sun has just got this information. The province, the CBC, CTV, everybody else, you have it. Go to our website and you'll have the same stuff they spent months to go after. They also still charge fees. They charge a lot of fees. We're in the middle of, or we're just beginning some battles over fees. So if you're the requester, you're having to jump through the hoops. You're having to pay money, maybe, and at the end of the day, you don't get an extra minute to look at it. The other thing is that as FOI requests are coming out, because of course we immediately filed one on how did they design their system, one of the memos that we found in the document dump, which they put up online, which we got 3 days later in paper form, is that officials of BC Ferries were looking at how can we proactively release some of the information that we know we're going to be asked. How much money is the CEO of BC Ferries making this year? They could see that coming, but for whatever reason, there are a number of memos where the people designing the website are saying, so are we getting the content on this or what? And then it mysteriously peters out. We may get that later after maybe another court case. So clearly, officials thought about this. They were looking at transparency. They were looking at proactive release. But the system that's actually in place, you don't get that. You have to file a request. BC Ferries officials have to go and approach the chair to try and find out what he made this year, instead of just putting up his expenses, things like that.
There have been examples, too, of journalists who've made requests. BC Ferries has posted all of the information. Everybody's had access to it at the same moment. Other news organizations scoop the journalist who made the request, but interpret or make a mistake in the data and kind of ruin the story or ruin the ability to make transparent the issue that was originally being explored. So, I mean, I think there's been that situation where this has thwarted a full discussion or an appropriate discussion by the person who was actually knowledgeable in the area of the issue that they were doing the research into.
Well, and it's unfortunate because, again, in terms of discussing public issues, normally somebody would put in an FOI or an ETHI request because they're interested in an area, they need more information to explain how it works. And if you create a system where essentially it's a race for who can hit the button faster, it's it's like a TV game show. Who can get their story out there quickly? You call up. I hate to pick on BC Ferries. Actually, I don't hate to pick on BC Ferries, but if you get the information, it's up online. You've got to get your story out there quickly. You tell BC Ferries, you got 10 minutes to get me your side of the story, or we're just going with what we've got.
So should there be some sort of timeline with this, that the original requester gets it, but there's a time lag where it's released later, or should it just go into a care system where you know that somebody else has requested it? Well,
there's competing issues, but there is a legal duty under the Access to Information Act in Section 4, Section 6 of the BC Act. The duty is to the requester. Mm-hmm. And I think it's something we're going to have to look at in terms of how to deal with this.
Thank you. Dr. Bennett, up to 5 minutes. And then Mr. Albrecht, and then we'll go.
I'd just like your advice on the sort of best practice on the ATIP piece, just based on as you know, the federal government used to have a site where you could apply to ATIP electronically, and for some reason they took it down 2 years ago. In developing what would be a future site, I was thinking, Mr. Walsey, you were saying, would you log each request as it goes up, and then do you give the answer to the person who asked for it first, and then with some sort of lag before the rest of the world gets it? Well, I mean, I think that there was a view that if you at least put it up there, you can prevent 32,000 other ones that are identical. Right. But does the person who asked for it get the answer with a little bit of time before everybody gets it?
Well, in our process, so if we receive it through an email and so on, we actually don't put the result of that detailed FOI request up online. It basically goes back to the originator. What we're talking about open data and all that, those are the proactive disclosure, routine disclosure elements, which is cut back on the more specific FOI requests. So we follow the existing process for that, and so they do get their information back, and we don't just post it back up online in terms of any requests. So that follows the normal process they have today. We're actually more interested in I won't say reducing those, because they could be some very good requests. But if we see in 2 or 3 or many different requests of the same thing, then we say maybe in the past there was an understanding that information was a competitive advantage or had some personal aspects to it. Let's take another look at that information and see why, in fact, we had to process it through ATI before. Maybe it should actually just be open. Maybe it should be part of our routine disclosure. So each division has a routine disclosure plan to go back and look at their FOI requests and say, why were we doing this? And maybe we don't need to. And let's put it up on the website, or let's put it up in the open data for self-service and so on. So, in fact, the divisions are, through their routine disclosure processes, are actually helping reduce those. But if you do get an FOI request, it goes through the traditional process.
I'd like to hear from all of you, but is it not a bit... Is there any other country in the world that still has to put a check in the mail and send it by snail mail to get an ATIP?
No.
I have no idea. What I'd recommend to you, though, is there's a really innovative group of public sector web developers in the United Kingdom called mysociety.org. They're a non-governmental organization that likes to do government-related things. They designed a site called whatdotheyknow.com. What do they do? If you're considering what a web presence for an access to information request might look like, I'd commend you to have a look at it, because it does things like it shows what kind of requests have come in. It lists successful requests. It allows people to be essentially it makes transparent the requesting itself. Now, you have to understand this is not a government site, so it's not necessarily completely up to date, but the design elements, I think, are really, really interesting and worth examining.
I think there does have to be a balancing. We do want information to be more publicly available, and we do want to have sort of reduce the number of redundant requests. But at the same time, what we've seen in some cases, not just BC Ferries, but other organizations, they've either said, we will put up media requests, not a really good indication that you're trying to be transparent, or they only put up the requests and they don't do anything else in terms of transparency. This is why I called it trompe-l'oeil transparency. They're just doing this in the hope that people will become frustrated and stop putting up requests, so there'll be a lot less for them to put up. In terms of the question of how long a delay should be, well, we'd have to talk about that. I would think that some sort of rebuttable presumption that if we haven't heard back from the requester in whatever period of time, days, weeks, then we'll put it up. Because what we're talking about here is longer-term transparency. There isn't any real vital interest that it must go up within 24 hours. I'm open to being persuaded otherwise, but...
Thank you very much, Dr. Bennett. Mr. Albrecht, 5 minutes.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. On page 13, Mr. Wallace, you indicate, outline rather, some of the different data sets that are requested and the frequency with which they're requested. I'm just wondering, those of you, and I know, Mr. Hume, you've had experience with federal governments, especially in New Zealand, would you have any idea as to what data sets are most frequently requested from a federal government? Would there be possibly some similarities that we could expect? Obviously, we're going to get input from Canadians, but are there some commonalities that you might forecast that we could expect in terms of what data sets would be most frequently requested at a federal level?
New Zealand's national government, and I think certainly things like expenses, as well as so chief executive. In New Zealand, deputy ministers are called chief executives, okay. And so chief executives' expenses are requested. Statistical information is requested, locations, road information, trail information, things that relate to recreation.
So national parks sort of thing?
Yeah, some of that, yeah, absolutely. Okay. If you go to data.gov.nz, you'll see the data catalog for New Zealand, so that can give you some understanding of what it is that they've made available and some of the more popular sets there.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, one of the things, and it's noted on the slide that a little bit earlier, and that is around who's voting on what, and that is becoming a very important thing. Now, if you're a member of Parliament and what they're voting on, that would be pretty easy to track. And there's thousands of bills that go through a given term of government, but people are paying attention now. People are saying, what is happening in that issue? So in that way, you get better, and we talk about that third purpose, which is better government itself through this. And then there's always things like expenses and so on that certainly is very popular. But I think voting, information on large projects, stimulus, what's going on, what the status of that, the deliverables on those different projects are, that's another thing to say, are they doing what they said they would do, and are they completing things? And so those are very popular things I think that any level of government should be releasing.
If I could just change direction just for the last minute here. different times today and in previous witnesses, there's been this term used that we have to provide the information in a format that the person can manipulate. And I understand that. PDFs are pretty rigid. Is there not a concern, a potential that someone could take that material, that information, and possibly change some of the data, especially if you're dealing with financial or statistical data, and give an impression of a particular issue that may be totally opposite to what the actual government data has? And if that would happen, what kind of checks and balances would there be in place for an average citizen goes on a particular website and gets this picture and assumes it's accurate but maybe misled? Or has that never been a problem in your experience?
My view on that is, I think the thing to recognize is that the web as a tool really operates in a culture of scrutiny, and that if you are presenting data that isn't of the same isn't the same as what the government, which has the high fidelity authoritative data set is, it's going to be obvious. And I think that that you have certainly from a question of reputation, and especially if you're media and you decide that this is a for governments, right? I mean, things don't get bad till the media picks it up, right? So if the media picks it up, they're going to go. They have their own processes of scrutiny. They will check, I would expect, not being a member of the media, to be able to look at that and say, is what they're saying legit? Are they not? Is the person themselves credible? There's going to be a very big difference between somebody who has no training in statistics, for example, versus somebody who is a university professor or a chief statistician or so and so, and the authority by which they get from their credentials. So I think all of that becomes part of the conversation around the data, and that's not to say that governments shouldn't be active if they see things that are misleading people, and opening up that conversation and doing that check and being part of that cultural scrutiny. This is why this idea of engagement and setting norms around how data gets used is really important. But I think for the most part, I haven't seen anything yet. I'm not terribly worried about it just because I know about this culture of scrutiny.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Albrecht. We're now going to go perhaps to Madame Freeman, 2 or 3 minutes. That'll be it.
For a few minutes, thank you. I know that at the federal government there are some restrictions with regard to giving personal information and copyright. Do you have an opinion on this, how this could be managed at the federal level? Have you had to deal with this kind of issue? We only have 2 minutes, remember. I know that Mr. Gugelek had already talked about something about copyright. Yes. With regard to copyright, belonging to the Crown, there were difficulties. You have heard the comments by Professor Geist, who also spoke. This is a program that does not recover a lot of money for the federal government. It's not really useful in terms of acting as a source of revenue for the government. However, there is a great deal of danger in having this be used to try to restrict the distribution of information or data if it's protected. Copyright is a very difficult and very specialized act. It's extremely difficult to fight against such a request for recovery. With regard to privacy, do you have an opinion concerning private data in terms of the data asked for? It should be treated in the same way as in the Access to Information Act, where it is protected. One is entitled to have one's own information. Mr. Wallace, how do you deal with it? Is it complex for you to deal with? That is, restrict private data. How do you deal with this?
tool set, which is a checklist, what we call a quality checklist, which the divisions have and go through, and it really gets very clearly down to what is personal information, what can be released, and what is not. So I think we could supply that to the committee, and you could take a look at it, and if you have further questions, we'd be more than happy to answer on what the toolkit's all about.
See you. Okay, that concludes the time we have allocated for this meeting, colleagues. I just want to, on behalf of everyone, I want to thank you for your attendance here today. This has been very informative, very interesting. But before we do adjourn, I will allow you half a minute each if you have any closing comments or remarks you want to address to the committee. I will start at this end, Mr. Gogulik.
I think what we've heard here today from our various perspectives is that when we're talking about open government, we're talking about information. It's more than raw data. It's information, and I think that we also recognize that there has to be an ability, in addition to receiving more information in a useful form from government, we have to be able to get information that we're not able to find.
I'd like to thank you also for the opportunity to come today, and I've enjoyed the discussion. I think the main point I'd like to leave you with is, again, building on the comment that Vince is speaking to, is that opening up government is a two-way street, and look at the processes and simplify the processes and engage the public in a collaborative spirit to help change. And I think if you go through the deputations and the unconference and opening it up, you'll actually improve the kind of data and the actual workings of the government itself. So there's a lot of good lessons learned across the various jurisdictions, and I encourage you to keep that going.
Mr. Hume, any?
I guess what I'd say is how delighted I am to have been part of the conversation today, and thank you very much for your attention. I'd say this is something that should be taken seriously, because I do believe that the question of open government, the sharing of data, making government collaborative, has a real imperative around how we will do government in Canada in the future. I think it's our finances and our demographics tell us that we need to do things very, very differently, radically differently, and this is one piece of the puzzle that I hope we can embrace.
Well, again, on behalf of everyone here, I do want to thank you for all your attendance and the effort and time and energy you put into this to these presentations. Thank you very much. And the meeting is now adjourned.